Hello everyone, I am Renown Zero and we are back again talking about Castlevania Nocturne, which is the new animated series from Netflix, which is supposed to be the sequel series to the original Castlevania animated series over on Netflix. And I will be giving my first impressions. I've seen the first 3 episodes, there are 8 episodes in total, and I'll be giving my impressions of those 3 episodes. And by the end of the week, I should be done with the series or the season, and I'll give my thoughts on the season as a whole. But starting off with episode 1, of course, we have scenes, and of course, there's going to be spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, I suggest you leave the video now. But we're going to get into spoiler territory here. So with episode 1, we get the introduction of Richter Belmont. We kind of get an introduction of his backstory and how he became Richter Belmont that he is in the series. He's an 8-year-old boy who is walking one day with his mother, faces the vampire Olrox, who ultimately deletes his mother from existence, deletes her from the world, and he grows up to be, of course, a vengeful vampire hunter. And of course, it shifts 9 years later. He's 17 when in the original lore he is 19 years old. And the original lore of Rondo of Blood is supposed to be him facing off against Dracula, searching for his lover Annette, which in this series Annette is of course race swap to be a tokenized version of her. Of course, because it's okay to do race swap from white character to black character and completely change what kind of character she is, going from a damsel in distress, because nowadays you can't have that in anything nowadays, in any kind of media from entertainment. You can't have the female being a damsel in distress. You gotta make her a strong, powerful woman character that'll need no man, and then use that same character to constantly degrade the main character of the series, which is something that happens probably 3 different times from episode 1 to episode 3, where they constantly belittle the main character in Richter Belmont. He's supposed to be this strong vampire hunter who's supposed to be deleting Dracula, which in this series, Dracula isn't even the main villain, which is how you kind of tell who is a real fan of Castlevania and who's not. Because if anybody who knows the real story of how the Castlevania series goes, it's every 100 years Dracula arises and a new Belmont is ready to face him and destroy him. Which people want to say it's lazy, because I have people who have a person who has said it was lazy. I'll be showing that. And it's obvious to just about anyone who's a real Castlevania fan. As you can see, I'm wearing a shirt with Simon Belmont. And in the original lore, Richter Belmont is the descendant of Simon Belmont. In this series, he is the descendant of Trevor Belmont. Well, at least he's supposed to be, I think. Actually, I think Netflix corrected that. He is actually a descendant of Simon. But going into the second episode, nothing really happens too much. We get introduced to Annette and this other black character that I don't really care about. And we're supposedly supposed to care about them because they're from a slave trade from the Caribbean, which this story takes place in France in the 1790s. And there's really no correlation here with the lore of the game, and they just somehow want to introduce this random plot line that really has no bearing on the original lore of Castlevania, which, come to find out, you get introduced to him in episode 2. In episode 3, by the end of episode 2, I believe, he gets killed, gets reincarnated or reanimated into a demon. And by episode 3, and then we get this garbage, nobody cares about it, backstory for Annette, which pretty much takes up the entire episode. It's a pointless storyline that nobody really cares about. Has nothing to do with Castlevania, because Castlevania is literally about the Belmont clan versus Dracula and defeating vampires and keeping the world safe every 100 years that he is resurrected. But we get this useless plot line, and of course, we have Annette essentially being about to be deleted by the demon that was created with the additional black character, because of course, once you do the race swap, now they have to introduce this useless, like I said, useless slave story plotline, fighting for equality and all this other nonsense that modern day messaging tells you about now, and has nothing to do with lore of Castlevania at all. Also want to say to anybody who thinks like this dummy right here. I've never once begged for money on YouTube. You're an idiot for ever suggesting that. And honestly, you should get a life because you literally your entire account revolves around Air July and being a quote unquote parody. Yet you're nowhere near as smart or IQ heavy as someone like Air July. But as I said, in the original lore, Richter Belmont is 19, not 17 like the series. Maria is only 12. She's not older, and they aged her up in this series, and they made her into a strong magician. Fine. You had Sypha in the previous series. It's fine. And Annette's originally white. Lover and friend to Maria, which Maria doesn't know Annette in the series at all. Same thing with Tara. They made Tara a completely different person as well in this series. I don't know why. But of course, I've had a little bit of arguments with people over on Twitter. This coming from Cheese, saying Netflix's Castlevania, aka Peak Anime Starter Pack. Writers who have never played the original games, check. Fans who have no idea that Castlevania is a video game franchise, absolutely. Reddit humor, not too far into it, can't really tell, but the dialogue is quite cringy at points. Pretending to care about the show, but then completely ruining all the main characters, which is something that the director Sam Dietz wants to talk about how Netflix or the Castlevania Nocturne official account wants to put up this tweet about how Annette belittles again in episode 6 Richter Belmont, calling him useless as F. But he wants to talk about how the marketing, it's like you're the director. You allowed that cringe dialogue to be in the series. So you can't backtrack now and call it bad marketing, which it's bad marketing because less people want to watch the show because they realize exactly what you're doing. You're taking a character that's been race swapped, trying to belittle the main character of the series, the guy who you literally have on the poster of the show as the draw for the show, and you want to belittle him in the show. But of course, people also write things like, quote, I don't like black characters, which is not the case. People like good written black characters, not tokenized versions of original white characters from original lore that is established. Apparently, you're a bad person if you like your lore to be intact when you watch a show. Or you should just play the video game, bro, if you want that same story. It's like people want to see their games in live action. People have, especially after the success of the original Castlevania series, which season 3 was very weak, and they brought it back with season 4. It made it pretty good. There was a couple of race swaps in there, but at least there, the characters are actually well written, whereas Annette isn't well written at all, as far as I'm aware. As far as I can tell from what I've seen, she's not very well written. She's literally there to just say, "Here I am. I'm oppressed. I came from this oppressed place, and you're a Belmont, but you're still an idiot." So, which I said the black characters in the show are utterly pointless to the overall story. The whole slavery plotline is pointless to the story. I don't give a crap about that. Richter Belmont is supposed to be the main hero of the story, and he feels like the white side character in his own story. Which, of course, I got people yelling at me about how it's only 8 episodes. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's only 8 episodes. To which I responded by saying, don't care. Richter's on the cover. Richter's who the series is based on, and I just love exposing you fake fans of Castlevania and of the established lore. You putting your statement in all caps shows how mad you are. I'm sorry, but cope with the fact that you weirdos only see legitimacy in black characters when they are tokenized versions of original white characters. To which, of course, he responds, now that I'm reading more of these comments, I'm starting to see that many people's only issue with the show is the black people. No. That is a big issue because typically black vampires don't exist in Castlevania lore, but I went into further detail as what people don't like about this series. I said, nope. Many people's issues stem from the bastardization of lore, race swapping of established characters, Dracula not being the main villain, the weird unnecessary scenes, the cringe dialogue, the pointless slave story plotline that has nothing to do with Castlevania. You go ahead though, focus on just the fact that original white characters were race swapped to black to add a nonsense storyline about slavery happening in the Caribbean, when the plot takes place in France. To which of course he responds, bastardization of lore to make a TV show. Yes. It has lore. It has literal lore. Plot of what this is based on. In the good old days, people desired only prosperity and peace, and certainly everyone thought that the days of unrest would surely never come, but on the other side of peace and prosperity, there invariably exists evil. Rejecting the people's prosperity, they corrupt the peace. Those who sought to restore the powers of evil and remake this corrupt world gathered. Smiles crept across their faces as the expectations for the upcoming Genesis swelled. After 100 years, a being of evil once again returned. Dracula. This man could change his form to that of a bat, a wolf, or mist, particularly favoring to act at night. Sucking the blood of young women, he retains eternal life. Master of the demon castle, god of the wicked, Count Dracula has returned. This is an actual description in the official manual for Rondo of Blood, which is what this series is supposed to be based on. Yet you've completely changed multiple characters and made Richter Belmont. You basically making Richter Belmont the side character in his own show. Similar to what Netflix did to The Witcher. Something that has established lore being bastardized. Race swapping, so effing what? There are established characters, but of course it's so effing what when it's a white character swapped to a black character. But I bet you if you swapped Black Panther to white, you would be crying right now. It's only season 1, and multiple arcs of Dracula is repetitive for a serialized TV show. No, it isn't. Because each version of where Dracula comes back and returns are all different. And again, basic lore of Castlevania is every 100 years, Dracula returns, and there's always a new Belmont to face him. It is the most basic of lore concepts with Castlevania, which, again, you further expose you're not a real Castlevania fan. You're just here to be a dick, and you want to tell people what they can't expect from a series that is based around a video game franchise that they've loved forever. What scene? The one right here that I'm not going to show because there's a picture here that obviously there's a not safe for work spoiler, and down in this area they show it because YouTube purposes I can't show it. There's no on-screen relations. Cringe is subjective. Pointless how? I already explained why it's pointless. Because it's Castlevania. Castlevania is about the Belmont clan versus Dracula and the vanquishing of evil. I already explained that. More proof that you're not a real Castlevania fan if you have to ask such a dumb question like that. If you want the game story, go play the effing game, moron. And I said, this is such an idiotic take. Me wanting to see the video game in motion is not hard. Don't call it Castlevania. Don't base the show on the game if you're not following lore. It's pretty simple. The game has cutscenes. They paid for the IP to tell a different story. So they paid for the IP to not follow lore. So again, further proving you're not a real Castlevania fan. That you don't really care about this IP. Where we had Savage Ratchet here, who says, so that's supposed to be an excuse to F over established IPs. Like, do you not hear yourself? Because this person says, the song and dance is so annoying and I'm ending it here. Successful IPs get adapted because they're safe bets. No, they get adapted because they have a built-in fan base, and then they end up screwing over said fan base by doing something different from what they're used to. And then they say, you're bad, you're terrible, you're this, you're that, if you don't like what we changed. Whereas new IPs die more often than not, no matter how good they are. We have a mountain of evidence for this. That's why it's literally that simple. No. To which Angry Millhouse says, F over established IPs like the Netflix series isn't literally the only thing done with Castlevania in nearly a decade. It's not effing it over, it's keeping it alive. No, it isn't. It's literally not. It literally isn't. And King Bash has a great point. We haven't had a new game since the first season in 2017, besides collection re-releases, and Netflix fans seem to not even bother trying to play the original series, but hey, at least it's alive. Yeah, it's the same thing with Star Wars, something like Star Wars, where they're like, well, at least you get more Star Wars, at least it's still more Star Wars is being made. Look at all these Star Wars shows, even though they're all garbage. At least in my opinion, outside of Mando Season 1 and 2. Which Sean Art Attack has a great point. Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2 was actually 9 years ago, and then recently, while not a new game, was the Dead Cells Castlevania DLC. Between these times, Konami had halted making games. They are now looking into getting back into the game, no pun intended. To which I also said, and Castlevania characters were added to Brawlhalla, Simon Belmont, and Alucard. They released 2 collections in the last 5 years, meaning the Castlevania Anniversary Collection and the Castlevania Advanced Collection, which a lot of people liked. I even have a physical copy from Limited Run Games before they decided to be a bunch of pansies and fire someone for their opinion. As well as having Simon and Richter Belmont as playable characters in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Alucard also being an assist trophy in it as well. So, and this Castlevania DLC came out this year. Came out, I think, in March or April of this year, to a sweeping great reception. In a game that's fantastic, by the way. Dead Cells is amazing. I could 100% recommend that game if you're looking for a great roguelike type game. But it's not Castlevania, because it's not. It's 100% not. And that's what I actually responded to this person as well. I said, keeping it alive, are you dense? 2 amazing collections that are far superior in every way to this show have been released in the last few years, as well as Richter and Simon Belmont's being in Smash Bros. You really are stupid. Because these people don't know anything about this franchise. They really don't. And it's always these pronouns and bio weirdos that don't know nothing about anything they talk about. Not a dang thing. In which they, of course, race swapped this vampire as well, Aztec. To Aztec vampire. They have multiple iterations of Aurochs in the games, and they still race swapped him. This is him in Symphony of the Night. This is him in the rebooted version of him in the Lords of Shadow reboot. So you have multiple iterations of Aurochs, but you decided to make him an Aztec vampire, which in the show he looks dark-skinned, which doesn't make sense. Does not make sense to this lore, ever. But I digress. They also changed this guy as well, apparently. Seems to be originally the son of Richter Belmont. Since according to this, he's the grandson of Simon, which if Simon is the father of Richter, he's obviously the son of Richter. So, but they changed him into an old man. And now, he's portrayed as a lone old man who has opted to live at the margins of society. Also, unlike the original character, whose exact family relation with the original Richter Belmont was left to ambiguity, this Juste is clearly specified to be Richter's estranged grandfather. So, they went from this is his grandfather. Now this is his grandfather. So once again, changing more lore in the franchise. But what really takes the cake is the Castlevania Nocturne director, Samuel Dietz, disavowing the Netflix marketing's insulting of Richter Belmont. It was disrespectful to the story, characters, fans, and to us creators. You already disrespected the fans by race swapping Annette and changing all this other stuff I showed. And making Richter essentially be out of character of who he is. And changing his design. Now, I'm pretty sure from what I've seen, he does get the bandana. Like he has in Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night. But I digress. Despite the fact that the series itself treats the source material with an arguably worse level of care, director Samuel Dietz has decried Netflix's recent attempt to market Castlevania Nocturne by publicly insulting its lead protagonist, fan-favorite vampire slayer Richter Belmont. So again, you are the director of this, so you allowed this character to be insulted in the show and to be belittled in this show. The insult in question, as made by the series' official Twitter account on September 30th, was itself inspired by a series of events which began in Nocturne's 4th episode, Horrors of the Earth. Therein, during Richter, Maria, and Annette's mission to rescue the latter's captured companion, Edward, I think that's the guy who got turned into the demon. The group found themselves in a surprise confrontation with the vampire Aurochs, otherwise known as the beast that ended the life of Richter's mother, in episode 1. Unprepared to do so, suddenly finds himself face to face with his mother's killer. Victor soon experiences a bout of PTSD, the pain in which causes him to turn tail and abandon the mission. So they turned him into a pussy. They turned a fan favorite vampire slayer in Richter Belmont. They turned him into a beta. They turned him into a coward in this show. So once again, making the main character of your show not as important, not as powerful, not as intimidating he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be an intimidating character to vampires. His family bloodline is a bloodline of vampire hunters. As he does, annoyed with his sudden exit, Annette accuses the traumatized Belmont of being nothing more than a run-of-the-mill coward. That's how he was written. Later on in Nocturne's 6th episode, Guilty Men to be Judged, Annette vents her frustrations over this event to the spirit of her mentor, Cecile. Still annoyed with Richter's quick exit, Annette at one point laments how the Belmont boy turned out to be useless as F. He literally ran away. She then proclaims, "Ran away," which is what the tweet was referencing. For some reason, believing this moment to be a selling point for Nocturne, despite the fact that its source material, Castlevania Rondo of Blood, is specifically a Richter-centric adventure, the official Netflix Castlevania account shared a net dismissal of the hot-headed hero and added, no matter the timeline, the Belmonts stay getting humbled by their magic companions. So this is in reference to, of course, Sypha, I guess, humbling Trevor, even though he was a badass in that show, and Alucard was still better. It says right here, the Belmont boy turned out to be useless as F. And this is your race swapped in net. It looks terrible, by the way. Unsurprisingly, this tweet did not go over well with the series fans, especially those whose introduction to the series came in the form of Konami's original games, which I've seen someone say that Capcom was the developer of this series, which is hilarious to me. Many of whom proceeded to push back against Netflix's insult. Quote, "This Belmont slander is getting ridiculous," Darian Belmont declared. "In what timeline or universe are the Belmonts being humbled by their companions outside of this adaptation?" And the original one. "I don't know why these writers hate the Belmonts so much, but it's getting really old. It's because they're straight white male characters. That's why. It's because they are straight white male characters. And of course, you have to always hate the straight white male characters, which, by the way, I forgot to mention that they portray the rich people in high class as only white people as well. They do this thing as well in episode 1 where they tell you all about it. Quote, "Need I remind you that Simon Belmont single-handedly deleted Dracula twice." Yeah, that would be Castlevania 1. Actually, no. Yeah, that would be the original Castlevania and Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, I believe. Recalled Baron von Crispy, and the second time he was practically on his deathbed trying to delete Dracula. These shows are written by no one except charlatans and wretches, envious of the devotion the games have garnered. He showed Super Castlevania 4. "Y'all had one of the best things with Castlevania and you blew it," noted Chalongo83. "This is why people love the strikes. You literally suck at your jobs and deserve to lose them." I agree. If you're going to put out a terrible product, you do not deserve to work. That would literally be the case in any job. Eventually, Netflix's post was brought to the personal attention of Dietz himself, courtesy of a fan who tagged the director's Twitter account. Quote, "What a strange take," Inner Demons GR noted. Quote, "I always thought the Belmont family were heroes of legend. Flawed at times, yes, but heroes nonetheless. Should viewers be hating Richter right now because I haven't gotten to this episode yet?" He then asked Dietz directly. In turn, the director responded, "We don't run this account, and I do not endorse this post." Well, you endorse this dialogue in your show. So I don't believe you when you say you don't endorse this post when you've endorsed this garbage dialogue in your show that you directed, that you could have told the writer not to put in that garbage dialogue in this show. So excuse me if I don't believe your bullcrap right now. Following his discovery of this post, Dietz returned to Twitter the next day to express frustration at how, in his eyes, Netflix's marketing represented the Castlevania spin-off's identity. "Man," said the director, "not too vague tweet, but I work too damn much to keep an eye on marketing so they don't misrepresent our show. It's not misrepresenting because people have seen it and noticed that this was in the show. To my grossly oversized to-do list." Sometime after this tweet, an act later revealed to be the result of Deet's own protestations. Netflix would take down their insulting Castlevania marketing attempt. Quote, I asked them to take that post down because, for one, while I'd like to believe it was unintentional, it came across to us as baiting rage engagement. Dietz explained on October 2nd. That goes fundamentally against everything we believe. And second, it was disrespectful to the story, characters, fans, and to us as creators. Well, you disrespecting a well-loved character in the Castlevania lore is disrespectful to the story, the character, and the fans. So you should be the last person that should be saying that this post was disrespectful to the story, characters, and fans. Meanwhile, you put that in there, and it's disrespectful to the story, the characters, and the fans, as well as the race swapping of characters like Annette is also disrespectful to the story, the character, and the fans. Richter's story arc is about his trauma, grief, the burden of his legacy, and the fear of living up to it. Never saw that problem in the game. But coming out the other side for the people he loves and becoming the hero we know him to be. He's already the hero we know him to be. You're trying to do this prequel story to this game that you're basing it on. His grief over his mother's death hits right at home with me. As someone who spent the better part of a decade battling but struggling to process the passing of my father, the guilt. So it's a self-insert for you. Got it. The guilt I felt as if there was something I could have done differently. The director further detailed before asking, why in the world would I want to make a mockery of that? Because clearly you don't like this character or this series. The burden of carrying a legacy hits right at home too, as we try to carry the weight of the Castlevania legacy. Decent emphasize. It's heavy. We work long hours full of anxiety trying to do our best to live up to it. There are pieces of us in his story. It's not something we take lightly. So again, more self-insert nonsense. If you wanted to live up to the Castlevania legacy, you should have just stuck to what Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night did for you. They handed you the lore, the story, and characters and everything on a silver platter and said, just make this in live action, and you would have been perfectly fine. But no. You always got a virtue signal, especially for Netflix. Bringing his thoughts to a close, Dietz concluded, quote, anyways, these are some things I just needed to get off my chest. There's probably going to be a few people annoyed with me that I said it, but I felt like it needed to be said. Wish me luck. So once again, all of this could have been avoided if this wasn't in the show at all. If you didn't put this nonsense in the show, if you didn't race swap these characters that have been established for 2 decades probably, because this game came out on the the PC engine, and re-released multiple times, you wouldn't be going through this problem with your marketing. So that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you for listening to my first impressions of this Castlevania Nocturne series. Of course, I'm going to finish the series and give my final thoughts probably on Friday. And I appreciate you all for watching this video. Hit the like if you liked it. Comment below what you feel about all this. Subscribe for more content. Hit the bell for notifications. Set the bell to all. That way you get notifications anytime I post a new video. And I will see you all on the next one. Peace.